Hey folks, welcome to the December 3rd, 2024 SIG Windows community meeting. This is a recorded meeting and will be uploaded to YouTube, so please adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct, which basically translates to be nice and kind to everyone. Right, so any announcements today?
Yeah, I think release is next week, next Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on your time zone.
Oh, hello, sorry.
No problem. We
Hey,
just
Mark.
actually just got started.
Yeah, we just got started. I had audio issues, so we just got started. So I just said any announcements, and James was saying 132 is going to be released next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah, and they cut the dashboard and the tests are passing at this point, so looking pretty good.
Awesome. All right. Want to give a few moments for any new contributors here who would like to introduce themselves. All right. Not sure if there's anyone new, so I'm going to move on to the next. Move on to the agenda. Mark, take it away.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I think the plan was if we didn't figure out the issue with why turning on in place pod vertical auto scaling or pod vertical scaling, if we didn't figure that out, I think the plan was we were going to get a group together and just like try and debug that. Yesterday I managed to finally get a CapZ cluster up, and I found out what the issue is, so I don't think we need to do that. It's interesting, and if people are interested, I put details about what happened in that Slack discussion. I had a suspicion that it was related to some of the changes that we did to setting the file permissions, because of some of the other security events, and that was mainly because most of the failures that we saw were around the pod volume, like the volumes not having the expected permissions. So I just instrumented the kubelet and put a dump stack call in where every time we changed the permissions. So it turned out that when this feature was enabled, we were resetting the permissions on the entire kubelet directory through kind of a very roundabout way, like a roundabout series of calls. And that was only happening when this feature was enabled. And when we do volume mounts, I don't know if they did that. So when we set up when volume mounts get set up for containers, there's a subdirectory underneath the main kubelet root directory that we put all of the files in, and then those end up getting mapped into the containers. And the permissions, when the permissions were updated for the root kubelet dir were updated, that was screwing up the permissions, the propagated permissions for the volume mount directory on the host side, which were getting carried over into the container. So that was causing some issues. I think that there's a couple of ways to fix this. One is I don't think that this feature should be updating the permissions on the entire kubelet root directory. In that same Slack chat, Tim Allclair said that because, like, for some reasons they needed to enable this kubelet state manager and to keep track of resources on the node, and it was that kubelet state manager that was getting initialized, and it set up, and as part of that it was setting file permissions on whatever directory you told it to initialize in, and I think that was unexpected. So either we update that to be a more scoped directory, which I think makes sense, and then we don't have to worry about this, or we figure out how to not set the permissions, either not propagate or not inherit or set the permissions on the kubelet directory to begin with. The permissions that were being set on the kubelet directory were 755, which I don't think we ever want to expose anything in the kubelet directory to at least the everyone group. So there's that. I think it was decided, it looks like the feature, even though it went beta after code freeze, it did end up for other reasons getting reverted back to alpha. So I think the plan on record now is to not undo the changes for Windows because we're so close to the release. And then we'll revert the changes with Windows in the next milestone, or in the next at the beginning of the next release, and get some tests running. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time this week to try and get the alpha test passes working again so we can validate this. But yeah, so that's kind of a long topic. Anybody have any questions or anything? Go ahead, James.
Yeah, so the vertical in place pod scaling is now, it's not in beta anymore, it's in alpha.
That was my understanding from the discussions. It's in the same Slack thread. Let me pull that up. Tim Alclar said, yeah, definitely. He said in-place pod vertical scaling will start alpha for 132, hoping we can re-enable beta in early 133. And then Frederico said, yeah, since we're keeping it in since it's staying in alpha at 132, they didn't think it was like that. They didn't want to revert the change to disable it on Windows so close to the release,
That makes sense.
which is okay. I didn't know that either. I thought that it was staying in beta, but I missed some discussions where I think that there's some other issues.
So Mark, just so that I understand, so you're saying that the feature now is in alpha. When it goes out in 132, it's still going to be in alpha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this feature's been alpha since like 128 or something. And then after code freeze, there was an exception to promote it to beta, which is where it got turned on by default. And then we started seeing the issues. And then instead of reverting the change to beta, there were PRs to disable the functionality in Windows. And I don't know what happened after that, but after that is when the decision was, I think there was a decision made to revert it back to alpha.
I see.
And disable it by
Interesting.
default.
Okay. So some other unknown issue made it go back to alpha, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really odd.
Let me pull up the. Let me pull up the issue if I can find it.
I guess that's unfortunate, but good from our perspective, since that means we're not shipping something that is totally broken on Windows.
Yeah.
So Mark, did they revert the PRs where they had disabled the support in Windows?
I don't think so.
Okay. So it's still disabled for Windows, even though it's an alpha at this point.
Yeah, I need to
Okay.
confirm. I'll confirm that today. It doesn't sound like it because I asked, like, should we try and revert the chain? Like, should we try and revert the change that disabled the feature for Windows? And the Federico said, yeah, this is something now that fits in 133 better, considering how close we are to the release. So
All right, makes sense.
yeah, so in the issue, I see Liggett said beta promotion did land with this pull request and was reverted in another one due to multiple issues. Oh, and they just linked to, I'll drop the link in the meeting notes. It looks like it caused a lot of other CI issues. And there's some discussions on Slack too. Okay, yeah. So it looks like there's some other issues in other tests that weren't just Windows. So we'll follow up with that pretty early on. Yep. No, I think if anything, this just highlights the importance of getting kind of bigger changes in early in the code, like early in the release cycle, which I think we did a really good job with this last release.
All right, looks like we are in a better spot with this release. But I'm hoping that when this feature goes to beta, I'll keep Windows in mind in some sense, or most likely we'll have to get involved there too.
Yeah, I'm gonna look and probably I'm going to author. I said I would author the PR to undo the disablement of the Windows and fix the issue in whichever way we can agree on to fix it, whether it's setting like not using the kubelet directory to set those permissions or making sure the permissions are set more correctly. So and open that when that's ready, even if it before the branch opens. So hopefully that'll go in and we won't have any issues with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think, Mark, this is something like someone new can work on with guidance from you? Or is this too gnarly?
Possibly, I think what would be probably more important is getting the alpha test passes running again so we can catch this before it goes in.
I've been wanting to help with that, Mark. I was literally just today morning looking at the alpha test passes. So tell me if, yeah, I'll try and get a repro set locally and reach
Okay.
out to you.
Mhm.
Excellent. Thanks for jumping in, Ritika. That will be really helpful for Mark.
Mhm. Yeah, we can take up offline and try and get those running again. And there is I think we did at one point have a PR job too that ran with some alpha features. So we could use that to validate that this works in a PR job as well.
All right, looks good. And there seems to be nothing else on the agenda to talk about, unless folks have other things on their mind. All right, going once, going twice, going thrice. All right, folks, thanks everybody for attending. I will see everybody else on Slack after this.
Mhm.